I wasn't supposed to notice it. It was just a side project, a routine digitization of school records for the local historical society. A quiet job, no deadlines. Just me, a laptop, and a stack of crumbling yearbooks in a windowless basement office. The school had shut down in 1997. No scandal, just depopulation and budget cuts. The building still stood on the edge of town, gutted, graffitied, its windows smashed out long ago. But its records were mostly intact, stored in heavy boxes that smelled like mildew and chalk dust. I had been working backward, starting from 1996. Graduation lists, attendance logs, teacher rosters, everything made sense. Until I reached 1983, there was no graduation list. Instead of names crossed out or marked complete, the spreadsheet for that year had a single status in every column, awaiting final evaluation. All 24 students. No grades, no comments, no notes from teachers. Just that one phrase repeated like a rubber stamp. It was wrong, obviously. A clerical error. Someone must have forgotten to update the final records. I almost moved on. But then I checked the class photo. It wasn't missing. It was blank. There was a square glued in where the photo should be, and below it a label, Class of 1983. But the image was a foggy gray smudge, not faded, just indistinct, like it had been photocopied through wax paper. And then I noticed something else. In the ledger's margin, in handwriting unlike the rest, shakier, smaller, someone had written, "We didn't fail them. They just didn't leave." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Later that afternoon, I returned to the storage shelves and found the attendance book for that same year, bound in brown vinyl, still stiff despite its age. I flipped through the pages. Empty. Page after page of unused grids, dates with no marks, subjects with no entries. Until halfway through, I found a single sheet with names written in pencil. No headings, just a list. 24 names, faint, slanted, as though written by someone looking over their shoulder. I didn't recognize any of them, until the very last line, my own name, spelled exactly right. Even my middle initial, even the dash in my surname, the one no one ever remembers. I hadn't written it. The graphite was aged, the paper yellowed. The record was at least 40 years old. I closed the book. When I opened it again, a moment later, there were now 25 names. I didn't go home that night. I told myself it was because I had work to do, that I wanted to finish scanning the 1980s section while the rhythm was fresh in my mind. But really, I didn't want to bring that book back with me, and I didn't want to leave it behind. I placed the attendance ledger on the table in front of me, closed, and kept the overhead light on like a talisman. The hum of the fluorescent bulbs seemed to keep the silence from sinking too deep. Sometime after 2 a.m. I dozed off. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up not all at once, but gradually. First to the sound of pages turning, then the unmistakable scratch, a pencil on paper. I sat up fast. The room was empty, still, cold. The book was open again, and the pencil I had used earlier was resting in the seam of the page, its tip dulled, graphite smudged across the margin. There was a new line beneath my name, Present, written in tight, deliberate strokes. At first I thought I'd done it myself, half asleep maybe, or in some trance of exhaustion. But the pressure was too deep, the paper slightly torn where the pencil had pressed too hard. I would have remembered doing that. And below the word, faint but visible, a second name had been added. One I didn't recognize. I flipped backward through the book, comparing the script to the older entries. Whoever was writing now, it wasn't the same hand. The earlier names were rushed, almost fearful. These new ones were neat, patient, like someone recording something they already knew would happen, like someone copying it down from somewhere else. I packed up the ledger, locked it in the cabinet, and left. The next day I took a detour. I drove out to the old school building. It was fenced off now, the windows like dead eyes. Inside you could still see remnants of posters, torn bulletin boards, a few desks stacked in the hall. The security company had left a printed warning, asbestos, unstable floors, no entry. But I walked around back. There was a broken section of chain link near the field. I climbed through. Inside, the hallways were dry and cold, the smell of dust so thick it stuck to the back of my throat. I found room 2B. The plaque was still bolted to the wall, though half the letters had fallen off. The door was half open. 25 desks, all perfectly arranged, as if someone had just stood up and walked out a moment ago. Only the dust told otherwise, inches thick on every surface, undisturbed except one. A desk near the middle, smaller than the others, pushed slightly back, as if someone had leaned away from the board. No dust. The seat was clean. The wood was darker, like oil from skin had seeped in and carved into the surface, barely visible in the poor light. Still waiting, I turned to leave and stopped. A figure was standing at the end of the hall, not moving, not blocking me, just watching. And though I couldn't see their face, I had the sudden certainty that they weren't one of the 25. They were the one who takes attendance. I didn't go back to the records room after that. I quit the digitization project with a vague email about personal reasons. The Historical Society didn't press. No one ever really cared about those records. No one except me, and apparently someone else. But the book didn't stay behind. 2 nights after I left the project, I found it on my kitchen table. No signs of a break-in, no footprints. Just the same brown vinyl cover waiting for me, as if it had always belonged there. The ledger was open to the last page. The list had grown again. 30 names now. My name was no longer the last, but something had changed. The column beside each entry now had marks, words. Some said absent, some said present. One just had a line through it, red, jagged, final. Mine said nothing, still waiting. I flipped to the front of the book and found something new, a folded note wedged into the seam. The paper was crisp, modern, recently added. Typed, not handwritten. Final evaluations are conducted in person. Classroom to be 11 p.m. Attendance is mandatory. That night I didn't set an alarm. I didn't need to. I was already awake. At 10:52 p.m., I was standing in front of the school again. Inside, the halls were silent, heavier than before. Room 2B's door stood open like a mouth, waiting. I stepped inside. 25 desks, all now clean, all arranged in rows, and all occupied. The air buzzed like static. I couldn't see their faces, just outlines, heads bowed, hands folded on desks, like obedient students waiting for the bell. My desk was in the front row. Name card already placed. I sat down. My chair scraped too loudly against the floor. The others didn't move. A sharp knock on the chalkboard made me flinch. At the front of the room stood a tall figure in what might have once been a teacher's coat, but the coat hung wrong, as if stretched too thin around something too long. The figure didn't speak, didn't breathe. It just began to move desk by desk, placing a slip of paper on each student's surface. No one looked up. No one touched their slip. When the figure reached me, it stopped, then slid the paper in front of me. I looked down. There was no grade, just a sentence. Evaluation deferred. Remain enrolled. I blinked. The room was empty, the figure gone, the students vanished, the desks bare and dusty again, but the slip of paper was still there, still on my desk. I left it behind, but it didn't matter. It followed me. I live alone now. I don't answer unknown numbers. I don't visit old schools or libraries or anything with a basement. But sometimes around 11 p.m. I hear the creak of a desk chair behind me, and I know attendance is being taken. Still waiting. Still waiting. Still waiting.
I only went back because the demolition was scheduled for the end of the month. The building was small, 1 floor, 4 classrooms, and a long hallway with peeling green paint. A village school, abandoned since the mid-90s. I wasn't from the area. I grew up in a city over 200 miles away. I had no reason to be there, no childhood ties, no memories. I only came because my husband had taken a job documenting decaying buildings in rural districts. He left me in the car, engine running, said he'd only need an hour. After 20 minutes, I got bored and wandered inside. It was colder than I expected. The silence inside the school wasn't peaceful. It was thick, heavy. Like the building didn't want anyone there anymore. The third room on the left had a smell that was different from the rest. Less rot, more dust. Something like scorched paper. I stepped inside without thinking much of it. The desks were arranged in neat rows, most of them warped or mold-stained. On one of them, right in the middle of the room, I noticed something carved into the surface. At first I thought it was just a name like the others, kids defacing school property. But when I wiped off the layer of dust with my sleeve, I froze. It was my name, Anna Kowalczyk. Not just Anna. My full name etched deep with a small line underneath like a signature. I stared at it for too long. Long enough to forget to breathe. I had never been here before. I had never lived anywhere near here. This school had closed before I was even born. Beneath my name, in smaller, rougher letters, someone had carved a second line. Don't turn around until you finish reading. My brain didn't process it immediately. It was like the sentence dropped in sideways. Too strange to make sense. Too quiet to be a threat. I stared. The grain of the wood. The dust in the carving. The message. Don't turn around. I hadn't turned. Not yet. But I started to hear something. A faint sound creaking. Soft, irregular, like old floorboards under pressure. Behind me. And that's when my right hand moved. Not voluntarily. It jerked like a twitch, and then lowered itself to the edge of the desk. There was a short pencil jammed in a notch. My hand picked it up. I tried to stop it, I swear. But it started writing on the wood just below the second line. Don't move. Don't speak. Keep writing until it leaves. The creaking stopped. Not because nothing was there, but because whatever it was had gotten closer. Closer than footsteps. Close enough to change the air. The space behind me felt full. And then I felt warmth on my neck. Not breath, heat. Like something standing close. Radiating. My hand continued to write. Shaking. Scratching shallow letters into the wood. If you turn around, it remembers your face. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Only the sound of pencil scraping, until I felt something press lightly against the back of my hair. Not a hand. Something colder. Something still. Then nothing. I blinked, and the next moment the classroom was empty again. I was standing, alone, pencil on the floor. My name still carved into the desk. Only now, the second sentence was gone. The part that said, "Don't turn around." I left without telling my husband. That was 2 weeks ago. Last night, I found a splinter of old wood on my kitchen counter. Same size, same grain. And in it, someone had scratched a name. Mine. I didn't touch the splinter. I swept it into a paper towel and threw it in the trash. But it didn't feel like that changed anything. My kitchen still smelled faintly of that same dust. Old paper, warm wood, and something acidic underneath. Like mold that had dried out but never truly died. I told myself it was just coincidence. A splinter can look like any wood. Names can be repeated. Maybe someone else once had mine. But that logic didn't settle anything. It just made me more aware of the silence in my apartment. Of the way shadows pulled near the corners earlier than they should have. Of how the hallway light flickered once, just once, when I walked past that night. I didn't sleep. I didn't even lie down. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at my right hand. It had stopped shaking, but there was still that tight feeling in the knuckles, as if the bones remembered more than I did. Around 3:40 a.m., I found myself digging through a box of old university papers. Not even sure what I was looking for. Something that would prove my life still had shape. That time was still moving forward. That I wasn't sinking backward into some place I was never supposed to see. That's when I found the drawing. It was on the back of a syllabus. I must have scribbled it during a lecture years ago. Just pencil lines. A few desks, a window, a faintly tilted chalkboard. But in the center of the sketch was a desk with something carved into it. Not words, not shapes, just a pattern. Exactly like the edge of the desk I'd seen in that abandoned school. The same knot in the wood grain. The same uneven corner. The same angle. I had drawn that room before I ever visited it. The next day I called the municipal office that was handling the demolition. I asked casually, pretending to be a journalist, if I could get the name of the former headmaster, or any archived class lists. They said the building had been a temporary relocation site during a flood in 1994. It had only operated for 7 months. No surviving records. No teachers. No photos. But they gave me one thing. A date. November 1994. The last time a class was held there. That night, I woke up to the sound of a desk being dragged across my floor. Only it wasn't my floor. I live above carpet. There's no wood anywhere in the apartment. The sound came again. Slow. Heavy. And then the quiet tapping of something being scratched into wood. I couldn't move at first. Just lay there, frozen, eyes wide, ears straining. Then silence. When I finally turned on the lamp, everything looked normal. Until I saw the note. Slipped under my bedroom door. A torn strip of lined paper. Smudged, damp, the kind they used in schools. Your name is almost done. Just 2 more letters. I didn't sleep again. Not that night. Not the next. This morning, the splinter I threw away was back on my counter. And someone had carved into it. With something fine. Like a pin. Face forward. Always. Or he'll finish from memory. The splinter was on my counter again that morning. No matter how many times I threw it away. Burned it. Flushed it down the toilet. It always came back. Like a warning I couldn't ignore. My hand was trembling now. Not just with nerves, but with something deeper. like it was being pulled by an invisible thread tied to that desk. I tried to resist, but the pencil on my nightstand rolled across the floor as if pushed. My fingers reached out without my consent and gripped it tightly. The wood grain of the splinter was rough beneath my nails. My hand lifted the pencil, hovered over the kitchen table, and began to write. Slowly, methodically. I turned. I didn't want to look behind me, but I knew I had to. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper. The silence stretched and tightened like a noose. I turned. The air behind me was thick. I could feel it. Not a presence exactly, but a weight. Like the space itself was watching. My eyes landed on the doorway. Empty. But then I saw it. A long, thin scratch in the wood floor, just beyond the doorframe. Like a claw mark dragged across the grain. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, was my name, etched into the floorboards. Anna Kovalchuk. I stumbled back, heart pounding. My hand dropped the pencil and the splinter shattered. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then the phone rang. I picked it up. A voice, quiet, raspy, barely a whisper. You brought him back. And the line went dead. I left the city the next morning. Never went back to that apartment. Never spoke of the desk. That sometimes, when the wind is just right, and the night is too quiet, I still hear it. The scraping of pencil on wood. And I know it's still waiting. For the last letter to be carved,